Welcome to Breaking Point, a podcast from CAPC, the Center to Advance Palliative Care. In this limited series podcast, CAPC invites healthcare workers from across the country to share their eye-opening stories from the front lines of the pandemic. Listen as they give us an unfiltered look at their reactions to the demands they've encountered and the coping strategies they've employed as they reach their breaking point. Your host today is Dr. Andrew Esch.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Esch. Thank you for joining us this week on Breaking Point. Today, we're joined by Michelle Owens. Dr. Owens is a hospice clinical physician for Hospice Austin's Christopher House and affiliate faculty at the University of Texas Del Austin Medical School. Obviously, she's from Austin, Texas, and we're super excited to have her here today. Michelle, thank you for being here and welcome.
Thanks so much, Andy. I'm excited to chat with you today.
So just a little background for the people listening. Michelle responded to our CEO, Brent Bowman's tweet a few weeks back and caught our attention. And so a little Google stalking, we had met before, but I wanted to see what you had been up to. And I saw you had wrote a piece for Kevin MD about not wanting to be resilient. And just personally, I mean, that your words captured what I've been feeling for the last couple of years. And I guess maybe the first question I'd like you to, or the first road I'd like you to go down is, what is that how you've been feeling through the pandemic, or what's it really been like in Texas for you working through this?
Oh man, it's such a big question, but so important. I wrote that piece last August, kind of as we were going through our second COVID surge, and really had just been a bit fed up with how much the word resilience had been used, especially in regards to burnout and physicians, and everybody was just not resilient enough, and that's why we were burning out. And it kind of just seemed like BS to me, It's obvious that we are resilient already, just to make it through medical school and training, and then doing the work we were doing in the pandemic. And so I thought it was gaslighting in a way, right? Like, oh, it's all on us again. We're not strong enough. We're not resilient enough. And that's why we're struggling. And we were struggling because we're working in a pandemic and seeing people die in ways that they should never die, and feeling so helpless. And such moral distress, right? I think the term moral distress came out and really helped to kind of sum up and describe the feelings we were having. And so, I kind of became this self-care advocate and ignited this passion I didn't know existed, really because of my disdain for resiliency. And, my husband's a physician. He's not in hospice. He's a family physician. And so we were kind of talking, and he, as husbands and partners like to kind of push your buttons, we had been replacing some plants in August, which is the hottest month of the year in Texas, because they had died. I had not been able to tend to them because I couldn't even take care of myself, right, in the midst of the pandemic. So we were replacing those, and he kind of cheekily said, oh, well, those plants weren't resilient. And it just made me really reflect on, well, yeah, but I don't want to be resilient, right? We are resilient. I don't need to be more resilient. And so in the article, I just talk a little bit about how I'd rather be Hearty, right? I was watching Ted Lasso with my husband kind of as a way to decompress at the end of the day, and, really felt like I could resonate with him. He wasn't perfect. He definitely had issues, but was really trying to work forward and get the support he needed. And it just really emphasized to me how we have to advocate for ourselves, right? And we have to take care of ourselves, especially in our field, right? We should really be the best at self-care of all the specialties, right? Because we give so much every day to our patients and their families that if we don't have good boundaries and we don't take care of ourselves, we're never going to be sustainable. And there aren't enough of us to begin with. So that's a big issue.
I agree totally. The thing that popped into my mind when you were talking was there's a lack of alignment between the service standards that people in palliative care hold themselves to and what we were able to do during COVID. And resiliency doesn't even touch that. That's not the word. Like moral distress, moral injury. Like those are the things. Like, was that something that your whole team was feeling? Was that an individual thing, or do you sense that was sort of prevalent throughout your organization?
Oh, I mean, I think for sure is prevalent throughout our organization. You know, I work in a freestanding inpatient hospice unit. We're a 14-bed unit, but because of COVID, we were actually kind of down to 6 beds. And then our visitation policy, which used to be, you know, kind of free for all, it wouldn't be unusual to walk into a room and have 20 family members in there. All of a sudden was down to 2 and then up to 4 and then down to essential visitors, and just kind of kept getting changed back and forth without any input from us. And really, I don't even think any input from our own organization, because it was coming from the state and, you know, local medical authorities. And so I, you know, was seeing maybe 3 patients a day at one point and was more exhausted in that day than I ever was when I was seeing 14 and I was in my 3rd trimester of pregnancy before the pandemic hit. And my nurses, you know, could feel it. My nursing aides, our chaplain, our social worker, volunteer. You know, we didn't have volunteers in the unit, and so everything was really just on our volunteer coordinator. You know, it was palpable. You could cut it with a knife. Just the overarching heaviness. Everyone was just kind of dragging. You know, we had to do more palliative sedation during the pandemic than I've ever done or even saw in training, because so many people didn't have their loved ones nearby. Right? People were dying alone, with the exception of the hospice staff with them. And that was incredibly distressing, you know, for all of us.
It's anybody who's done this work has been asked, how do you do what you do? Isn't that so hard? Well, yes and no. The hard is offset by the relationships we build with patients and families, and the suffering that we can relieve, and the connection we can create for them at the end, or when they're living through serious illness. And the pandemic took that away from us. So to do palliative care during a pandemic, I don't know. It took the things that drew me to the profession and made it a lot more difficult to achieve. I don't know if you felt that way. It sounds like maybe you did from what you said.
No, absolutely. I mean, it was soul crushing at times, right? You know, I mean, people say that to us all the time. You know, either they don't want to engage with us after they ask what we do and they kind of move on to the next person, or there's that, oh my gosh, I don't know how you do what you do. And my response had always been, right, well, it's such an honor and a privilege to connect with people, you know, during such an important part of their journey, right? But when, like you said, when we weren't able to build those bonds, or we were the ones having to tell family members they can't come and visit, right? Or you can't come and visit until your loved one is actively dying. And actively dying is such a loaded term and not really well described anywhere in terms of timeline. And even for us being maybe better prognosticators than others, we still don't know, right? I mean, I've been wrong so many times. And so there was just kind of this sense of helplessness, but then also power in the fact that we had to make the decisions when people could visit. And I felt like I personally was not allowing people to say, I love you to their loved one when they were in a state that they could hear it and reciprocate it. I personally was not allowing people to have a final embrace or kiss from that person that meant so much to them. And I felt like I was doing harm, right? You know, I was like, I took an oath to do no harm. And I feel like I am inflicting harm by preventing this connection. And, you know, there's no medication to replace that connection, right? There's no medicine to replace that love that the families give to their loved ones in those final hours and days.
Yeah. I was hoping you were going to talk longer. I got a little emotional while you were talking. So what did you do to find joy in that time?
You know, I think one of the things that's really kept me sane during this time is I have 2 little ones. You know, I have an almost 4-year-old and a just turned 2-year-old. So almost kind of a pandemic baby. And so, you know, little kids, you know, I'm so thankful that ignorance is bliss in a way, right? You know, they haven't really understood as much about the pandemic. And so coming home and being present with them really helped to fill my cup. And so, you know, that was definitely helpful. Watching a lot of, you know, feel good TV or even smut TV, you know, like Selling Sunset, I hate to say is a guilty pleasure of my husband and I's. And so just kind of watching things that weren't real life were somewhat helpful. And then I think the other thing was just kind of this journey into, really advocating for physician well-being and staff well-being in general. I had an opportunity to participate in this leading physician well-being program through AAFP, where I, was connecting with a lot of people that felt the same way, right? So having that validation and connection was really powerful. Receiving resources and kind of mentorship and how to make a difference, not only for my own well-being, but for my organization. Balance groups were a part of that. And that was incredibly powerful and impactful for me with some difficult cases that I had and being able to debrief those.
What kind of groups? I missed.
Balance, BALINT. Have you heard of those?
No, I haven't.
So balance groups are, seen a lot in family medicine residencies. They started, back in World War I. Dr. Ballant was a family physician over in England, and his wife was a social worker. And so they noticed that after the war, a lot of the PCPs were having a lot of, distress dealing with the soldiers that had PTSD. And so they formed these groups that are generally facilitated by a physician and a psychologist to allow physicians to come together and talk about those patients that kind of weigh on their mind. Either they see them on their schedule and you kind of have those emotions of maybe dread or sadness or anxiety, and kind of having a psychologically safe space to talk about the physician-patient relationship, where other people kind of offer perspectives that are not judgmental of, how the physician might have been feeling, how the patient might be feeling, how other key players in the dynamic and in the relationship feel. So you're able to kind of debrief and process, why are you feeling that way? And so, I didn't know how it would go being a hospice physician with all family physicians, but talking about hard cases, right? Like pediatric ventilator withdrawal or, just really challenging cases in the midst of the pandemic of not allowing family members to be at the bedside. It was very cathartic to talk about it. And you kind of, the way the groups are set up is that you present your case and then you're able to literally kind of push back. So you've kind of given it to others to process, and you get to kind of sit back and just breathe and relax and watch the group kind of take the case on. And hearing different perspectives, having people, offer up. One of the things that was so impactful to me is someone said, I can imagine that the patient is so grateful to have you as their physician, advocating for them and supporting their family. And I think so often, at least for myself, I haven't thought about that. Right? About the patients who are unresponsive and can't tell us how they feel, but just, reminding ourselves of like how important and meaningful and impactful the work we do is, because the pandemic really, it's just been so hard to navigate, just so heavy and icky at times. And so those groups have been, really a wonderful kind of way that I've incorporated into my self-care. And then, of course, the CAPC well-being debriefings, I, was able to attend one of those when they were rolled out after June 2020 as a participant. And it's similar to Ballant, but a little bit different. And so my team and I actually started piloting those last April, and we do them once a month with our inpatient unit staff. And they've been just a really great way to, again, kind of connect with each other, validate kind of our shared experiences and emotions, and also just model for our team that we care about their well-being enough that we're going to check in with them formally, once a month at minimum.
That's excellent. I think a lot about the medicine wasn't great in 2019 before all this happened, right? Docs were pretty burned out already. Like, I wish it didn't come at the cost of life and distress and anxiety and everything. But the one thing I'm a little bit optimistic about for the future is that there's a recognition that this is hard work, and like even giving each other grace, like people who aren't feeling good, you say, stay home. Did that ever happen in 2019? Like, I would drag myself in not being able to breathe sometimes. And now, like, I think there's good that's come out of this. What do you see from your perspective? Do you agree with that view, or am I being too, glass half full?
No. I mean, I think it's definitely given us such a perspective, right, of things we took for granted pre-pandemic. And also, for me specifically, I've learned to be much more compassionate to myself. I kind of got more into Dr. Kristen Neff's work with self-compassion. And she has this quiz you can take. And I found out that I was very mean to myself, even though I consider myself to be very compassionate with my staff and my patients and families. And so I think being more aware of that has made me in turn more compassionate, right? And understanding the things that my staff's going through at home and how hard it is to do this work, right? And especially when you have limited resources and you don't have the families at the bedside, which actually are such a big part of the care. And so I think that it's made us more compassionate, able to afford and offer grace for ourselves and for each other. And I think just that perspective has changed so much because we've spent more time at the bedside because the family members haven't been in there. I recently lost my grandmother, who was like a mother to me, about a month ago. And being on the other side as a hospice physician was one of the most humbling, emotionally depleting, and hardest things I've ever done in my life. And it gave me even more empathy and compassion and love for the people who do the work that we do every day. So perspective is just so powerful.
You've put a lot of thought into self-care, being Hearty. What advice do you have for the people listening? Where should they start if they're interested in going down this road that you went down? Where would be the place they could start?
Well, I think most importantly, right, we put ourselves last and we have to change that. So you have to start with yourself, right? In order of just being a good human, a good mother, a good, physician, a good parent, a good friend, you have to take care of yourself. And so I think, really looking into what am I doing for me now, right? What boundaries do I have? What boundaries do I not have? When was the last time that I just took a day and did whatever I wanted, even if that was nothing, right? I think we should be taking at least a day per quarter just to focus on our well-being, right? Like a Target and massage day, or a day to sit and watch Netflix, or a day to sit and bathe in the forest or go for a walk, right? I think really refocusing your own care for yourself and giving yourself permission. I think, in medicine, we oftentimes feel guilty when we take care of ourselves, but if we don't do it, we will not be able to be, good stewards of caring for our patients and families. I think it's important to think about how compassionate and how much grace we give to our families and patients and give that to ourselves, and to also take into context the advice and the support that we give family members, right? I'm always telling family members, are you eating? Are you sleeping? You got to make sure you take care of you, or else you're not going to be able to be here for your loved one. Well, we need to say those same things to ourselves. And then I think once you can kind of feel like you're advocating for yourself, you'll be surprised that just modeling good self-care for yourself is a huge thing for staff, for your family, for friends, right? If people see that you're doing it, they see how important it is. And then kind of the next steps are really, finding out who is championing this in your organization. And if there isn't someone and you're passionate about it, asking some questions, right? Like, what are we doing for staff? Because the lavender and the pizza parties and like the attaboys are not enough, right? Like that's almost gaslighting in a way. So, just kind of finding out what's going on. I've been fortunate to, partner with AHPM and create a self-care forum with a Palliative colleague of mine. We have a Facebook group called HPM Hopefuls, which is an interdisciplinary hospice and palliative group focused on self-care. There are just so many opportunities now to really just kind of connect with each other and find out ways that we can be better versions of ourselves so that we can continue to do this work in a sustainable and longitudinal way.
I'm so worried that this is going to take away from that answer you just gave, but I don't get Target. My wife is a Target person too. It's not the way I would spend my self-care day, but anyway.
Well, the beautiful thing about self-care is that it's not one size fits all. I think unfortunately we see these memes all the time, right? Where it's like candlelit baths and lavender and massage. And for some people, right, and Target, that doesn't necessarily fill your cup. So I think it's also getting the permission to do the things that do fill your cup, regardless of what that looks like.
Yeah.
So, no Target for you, but Target for me.
No, believe me, we get enough Target into the house from my wife. So what issues or what topics come up on those groups that you're part of, like the self-care groups that are interdisciplinary? I'm so curious. Are there themes by discipline, or are there just themes from being in healthcare? Like how specific is that to somebody's lived experience?
I think the beauty of what we've seen in it is that, regardless of your discipline, doing this work is hard. And sometimes just having someone say, like, I've had a really hard day, and seeing people who, because these people are across the country, right? Just having people connect with others that they don't even know to say, man, I had a hard day too, right? Or, offering support to each other, offering resources. It's been a great place for people who have really wanting to champion well-being within their organization to say, hey, what are y'all doing? Like, what do you do with your team that's helpful? And people kind of exchange ideas. People share, sometimes it's just like a funny meme or just like a reminder to, be kind to yourself today. Like, this is really hard, right? Even though we're like going into year 3 of the pandemic, it hasn't been any easier. So there's very different things. I've seen a lot more of just kind of navigating loss and grief as a, practicing member in a hospice and palliative team. I don't think we talk enough about that. I mentioned my grandmother had passed away 4 weeks ago. She passed away in my own unit. And so that's been a really hard and complicated thing to navigate in coming back. Right. I mean, it's been a beautiful thing. It was a blessing. But I think so often in this field, right, we are all going to go through that, where we lose someone that we love, potentially in our own hospital, in our own hospice, in our own hospice unit. And what does that look like, right? What kind of support do you need for that? What does bereavement look like for that? How do you take one hat off and put another one on? So it's just been a great, just a great space for people to connect authentically and, support each other and just be true to themselves, right? And saying, hey, this has been really hard for me. Or, people love Ted Lasso. So sometimes we have, like, what shows are you watching? Peloton, like, what's your Peloton name? And we have a hashtag, just all kinds of different things.
You took us down this road. I'm going to go a little further with you if you're comfortable with it.
Of course.
What are some of the things? So just to summarize, what I'm hearing is you're a doc doing a really hard job during a pandemic with all the fears everybody had. You're also a caregiver for your mom who was ill during this time. And now you're a grieving family member. Like, what, how?
It was my grandmother, but she was like a mom to me.
Yeah, right.
But not that changes anything. Yeah, me, sometimes when I sit down and I look at all the things that I've juggled, I kind of ask myself the same question, but I also realize that the struggle and the juggle is real for everyone. So I think, as I tell my patients and family members, right, sometimes it's 1 hour at a time and 1 day at a time. I think as a mother of 2 little ones, I have to keep going for them, if nothing else, right? And they're at those ages where they're so intuitive that they ask the really hard questions. My 3.5-year-old is better at self-care and naming her own emotions than I think most adults are. So that she inspires me at times. But I think, really this kind of advocacy for self-care and really getting out there and sharing my story and being vulnerable. My husband tells me that I do like kind of, what is this, like social media journaling, right? Like in these groups or in these spaces, sharing how I feel instead of writing it in a journal, I post it, right? And then I see that other people feel the same way. And that, I think, helps to validate that my emotions are normal and other people are going through this and it'll be okay, right? I mean, I guess that's also maybe, as much as I hate to say it, that I am resilient, right? But I'm wanting to kind of make sure I'm a little bit hardier in the months and years to come.
Yeah, I don't want to be resilient doesn't mean that I can't be resilient.
Exactly.
I get it.
Yeah.
We're winding down to the end of our time, but I want to ask you one more question, and it's not going to be easy, so I probably should have prepped you for it. But how do you see palliative care and in the work you do, hospice care, coming out of the first 2 years of the pandemic? when I've talked to my palliative care colleagues that work like in hospitals doing hospital-based palliative care, there's more of an acceptance of palliative care. Consult volumes are up. Resources are still lagging behind as usual. But like we seem to have been embraced. How's that feeling in the settings that you work in?
I agree. I think more people know what it is that we do, or at least have a better idea instead of like, oh, what is that? Right. I think that there's more respect for us in the community. People are so much more, thankful. And really, I feel like I've heard a lot more gratitude in the last kind of 2.5 years than I remember hearing before. And I think that, the other thing is that, the hope is that we will be kinder to ourselves and we will advocate for ourselves so that we can continue to do this good work. Right. So my true hope is that the organizations that support us will truly support us. Right. And we'll make sure that there are things that are integrated into the culture that do support well-being and that do cultivate a sense of belonging and being valued and needing to take the time when you need to take it and not being judged for that, right? That it's not that we only extend grace to each other now because we're in the midst of a pandemic, but that grace continues to be extended, here and throughout the rest of our careers and our journeys, right? We should all ideally be living in a way that we extend grace and compassion to everyone, right? Not only when we're living in a pandemic.
Thank you so much for being on. I get why you like Ted Lasso. I'm a fan too. And the positive spin and the hopeful outlook in a time when, things can look so bleak is, I think, super important. And you seem to personify that. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I really hope I get to see you in person at a seminar somewhere. When's the next in-person thing we might see each other at? Hopefully soon.
Oh, goodness. Hope, if nothing else, maybe what is it? AHPM next year's in Canada. It'll be cold, but we'll definitely need to go get like a hot toddy then.
Yes, for sure. All right. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you for listening today. For debriefings, the Emotional PPE Toolkit, and more, visit capc.org/COVID-19.